It's another big weekend coming up in the Championship. Let's jump into our score predictions. Guys, welcome back to another video on the channel. We've got some massive games going on both at the top and bottom of the Championship this weekend. As always, we want to get your thoughts on what you see happening this weekend. Do get your score predictions in the comments down below and get yourself entered onto the prediction league. All you need to do to enter it is just leave your score predictions in there. Before we do jump into my score predictions, I want to give a big shout out to our sponsors over at OneFootball. Really handy to have as we do head into this second half of the season. Now, if you want to stay on top of everything that is going on in the Championship and around the footballing world in general, OneFootball is the place to go ahead and do that. You can get live updates to your phone whenever a goal goes in. It's also handy to have a little bit of a look at the opposition before you play them. Look into who their danger men are in a little bit more detail and know what to expect when you are coming up against them. I always like to do them, but yeah, highly recommend. Check it out in the link down below, loads on there. And before we do jump into anything, let's take a look at the prediction league and what the midweek fixtures have gone ahead and done to it. So still leading the way with a grand total of 49 points. We have DCFC OBGO 5 really starting to lead the way there, but he's got some stiff competition in there around the top. In the League 1 prediction league, it's currently Liam K who's leading the way. He's there with 35 points at the moment. The True Red also climbing up the table. And then for the League 2 prediction league, it's currently RFC Moments who's leading the way with Mohamed A right behind him. But now without any further ado, guys, let's jump into my score predictions. So let's start out with tonight's game, and it does not get much bigger than this. We got Swansea going up against Norwich, an absolutely massive game in the race for automatic promotion. I think that if you were to ask the vast majority of Championship fans a few weeks ago who's going to make it into the top two, I think that Norwich would have been on pretty much everyone's list, and it was always a question of who was that other side going to be. But after back-to-back goalless draws here and their form ever so starting to slide off a little bit, it's opened up a bit of a gap, especially if Swansea go ahead and win in tonight's game. Now, for Norwich, obviously, they're still missing that creativity of Emi Buendia. This will be his second and final game of that suspension after getting sent off against Middlesbrough. Swansea need to capitalise on that, and I'm interested to see how the home side actually goes about playing for this game, because against Brentford they were probably a little bit passive in that one. They allowed Brentford to come onto them a little bit, obviously got back into it with Conor Hourihane, who's been an absolute wonder in midfield for them so far. Really does add that quality. I think that him and Grimes bounce off each other quite well, really. But yeah, I'd like to see Swansea really going for this one. I think there's a real opportunity to be beating this Norwich side here with the way they're playing at the moment. But when it comes to Norwich, you can't write them off, can you? Even with this ever so slight drop off recently, they're still not losing football matches, which is a testament to them at the moment. And when they do get Buendia back, I'm sure they're going to look to really attack the second half of the season. Saying that, I've got a gut feeling Swansea might do it here. I'm going to go 1-0 to the home side, Swansea. FIFA's going 2-0 Norwich. That's an absolutely massive game. Really interested to see which way you guys are predicting that one. Next up, we then go to Coventry up against Watford. Each side a little bit disappointing in midweek, considering they both took the lead, ultimately to go on and lose 2-1. Coventry in that mad game at the bottom of the Championship, losing against Forest. Honestly, the bottom of the table at the moment is completely unpredictable. You really can't call it. And obviously Watford losing against QPR in quite disappointing fashion late on. Now, interestingly enough, Watford so far this season have scored more penalties than any other Championship side, 8 so far this season, and with Coventry being fairly guilty at giving them away, already conceding 10 so far this season, we wouldn't be at all surprised to see them getting another in this one. Now, for Watford, actually, scoring goals has been a bit of an issue when you look a little bit deeper into it. So only 17 goals Watford have scored this season from open play. A lot of them have come from the penalty spot or different set-piece situations, which is only 17 scored, considerably lower than everyone else currently battling it out in and around the top 6. So that's something that needs to be looked into, especially with the calibre of players that they have in the final third. You'd expect them to be putting up a few higher numbers than that. Having said that, though, I think they may bounce back in this one. I'm going to go 2-1 Watford, with FIFA saying it'll be 2-0 Watford. Coming up next, we got Barnsley going up against Derby. Now, I think it's fair to say that Barnsley have had a little bit of a slide recently in terms of their form. They're now without a win in their last 5 Championship matches. Saying that, their last couple have obviously ended as draws, either of which they could have gone on to win, and also they are coming off the back of a fairly tough run of fixtures. Derby, on the other hand, are, I mean, an absolutely impossible side to predict at the moment, aren't they? I've given Wayne Rooney a lot of plaudits, I think rightly so, for the work that he's done with Derby so far, but that performance in midweek was absolutely shocking. Rotherham completely bullied them, and from a defensive defensive aspect, where they've been so strong recently, they completely fell apart. So unless they get themselves back into the right headspace for this game, I could see Barnsley doing them over. Saying that, Derby have been a really peculiar side to predict so far this season. They've won the matches that you don't expect them to, and the matches you do expect them to win, they go ahead and lose. So tough one to call from many aspects. Saying that, I'm probably going to go for Barnsley here. I fancy them to bounce back. I'm going to go 1-0 Barnsley in this game, with Thief saying it'll be 1-0 Derby. Next up we go to Bournemouth up against Birmingham. Now each side is on an absolutely horrible run of form at the moment. Birmingham have only won 1 of their last 10 matches, and Bournemouth obviously losing their last 4 consecutive games in the Championship, which has ultimately cost Jason Tindall his job there. Now from a Bournemouth perspective, I'm interested to see if that sacking has any sort of immediate effect on performances, or if it's going to take them to a point that new manager thought us to really start seeing some changes there, because clearly something's been wrong for quite some time there with that Bournemouth squad. I'm interested to see if we do see a bit of a reshuffle of the players, if we get to see the first appearance for Ben Pearson in midfield. I feel like they're lacking that sort of anchor in the middle for them at the moment, and yeah, the way they lost that game in midweek against Sheffield Wednesday was absolutely embarrassing with some of the goals they conceded. Speaking of embarrassing, Birmingham in midweek against Wycombe, that felt like a real must win for their season, and quite the damning result for Aita Karanka. The fact that he didn't look to change things, where for quite a few moments of that game, Wycombe looked like they were there for the taking. Maxime Collin had this unbelievable header which somehow didn't end up in the back of the net. But yeah, that goalless draw, really damning result there in Birmingham's season. Obviously they will be missing Mark Roberts from this game after he was shown the red card in that game. For a score prediction for this one, I'm going to go for a draw. I'm going to go for a 1-1 in this game, with Thief saying it'll be 1-0 Birmingham. Next up we then got Bristol City going up against Cardiff. Now Bristol City, after losing their last 2 matches, are going back to Ashton Gate, where they've been decent recently. They have won their last 3 home matches. Bristol City, it's a tough one to be critical of Dean Holden at the moment, or all too critical, because of the injury situation he's working with at the club at the moment has been absolutely ridiculous. Like, I know a lot of Championship clubs have been hard hit by injuries this season, but with Bristol City it's just been completely on a new level. I think that Tommy Rhodes is the recent one to be injured, isn't he? Chris Martin's also struggling with a hamstring injury, and that's on top of all the other, abundance of injuries that they're working with at this point in time. Now Cardiff are an interesting one coming into this game. Under Mick McCarthy so far, it's been 2 back-to-back draws. I'm interested to see if someone like a Johnny Williams is thrown in for this game, as they've looked for something a little bit different in midfield to be that link between midfield and attack. I think for Bristol City especially, a lot of their goal scoring onus will fall now on the shoulders of Jeju. Interestingly enough, he is currently, I think, the most clinical striker in the Championship, scoring with 32% of the shots they take. Now I know that Bristol City aren't exactly the most free-flowing attacking team who take like loads of shots per game, so they're in need of someone clinical, and Jeju's being that for them at the moment. Score prediction in this one, I'm going to go for another draw. I'm going to go for a 1-1 in this game. I think that Cardiff may frustrate Bristol City, whereas Thief has gone for a goalless draw. Coming up next, we then got Luton going up against Huddersfield. Now the Championship's an interesting league at the moment, whereby teams at the top really seem to be in brilliant form at the moment, most of them going on really long unbeaten runs. Teams at the bottom are really starting to pick up at the moment, picking up results out of nowhere. And those that are sort of sat in mid-table, very hard to call and been quite inconsistent recently. We'll look at Huddersfield first for an example. Their last game really frustrating against Stoke, a 1-1 draw where they were playing against 10 men for the second half. They're without a win now in their last 5 matches, and are without a win on the road in their last 8 matches. Luton, quite similar, been a little bit of a frustrating pattern for them recently. They've only won 1 of their last 4 matches now. Last couple of them both being 1-0 defeats, where, to be honest with you, there wasn't really all too much in the games that they did lose. So I think they'll see this as an opportunity now against this quite inconsistent Huddersfield side to get back to winning ways. Now for Huddersfield, what could be a major boost for them is Jonathan Hogg potentially returning. I think they missed that maybe bit of bite and his real presence in the middle for them. He is that sort of player who will drag them over the line in those areas. But saying that, I think I've got a bit more confidence in Luton for this one. I'm going to go 2-1 to the home side. Thief's aim, it'll be a 1-1 draw. And coming up next, we then got Middlesbrough going up against Brentford. Now Brentford will see this weekend as a real opportunity for their season, especially with Swansea going up against Norwich. So dependent on what happens in that game, Brentford could see this as a real opportunity to put some space in between themselves and 3rd place, or make even more ground up on Norwich. Now Middlesbrough obviously did a fantastic job on Norwich last weekend, goalless draw in that game. Defensively they were absolutely brilliant. Donald Fisher doing a perfect man marking job job on Todd Cantwell. I'm interested to see if he's deployed in quite a similar fashion on maybe like Sergi Canos in this game or something along those lines. I do think that this one will be probably a little bit tougher for Borough actually. I think that Brentford are being a lot more clinical at this point in time than Norwich are. You only need to look at the goals they're scoring at the moment. 10 goals scored now in their last 2 matches. And I think that considering that they're playing with a completely new forward three than what they were with last season at the moment, you know, Sergi Canos, Ivan Toney and Tariq Fosu, despite it being a completely new forward line, given how fluid they are still playing at the moment, I think that's a real testament to the coaching at Brentford. You know, Ivan Toney's been brilliant lately. Sergi Canos for me has really been the surprise package who's really stepped up his game in the recent few weeks. And for a score prediction, I think that Brentford just edged this one. Don't get me wrong, Warnock could pull off another masterclass in this one and make it tough for them, but it's hard to see past Brentford at the moment with the way they're playing. I'm going to go 2-1 to the away side, with Thief saying it'll be 1-0 Brentford. And then next up to the day, we got Millwall going up against Sheffield Wednesday. Now, something tells me that this probably isn't going to be the game that many neutrals are going to be watching over the weekend. It's probably not going to be a cracker in terms of the actual football that's being played, but Sheffield Wednesday, given their plaudits, they're playing effective football at the moment and it's working for them and they are getting results. They've now won 5 of their last 7 matches, obviously. Because of the situation with the points deduction, they're in a situation now really where they can't afford to stand still and reflect on how well they're doing at the moment in terms of the results they're picking up. They need to keep on churning out these results. A lot of the games that they've been involved in recently have been fairly low scoring and fairly tight affairs, but that's been suiting them right down to the ground. And to be honest with you, I feel like this game's going to follow along in a similar pattern. Now, Millwall have drawn their last 3 matches in the Championship. 2 of those games have finished as goalless draws. I wouldn't be all too surprised to see a similar game unfolding in this one. Millwall, what I find absolutely baffling still about them, we're in February now and they've still only won 1 home match all season, which is absolutely bonkers to me. For a score prediction, I'm going to back Wednesday now. I'm going to go 1-0 to the away side. I feel like they've just got a little bit more edge about them at this point in time. That result in midweek against Bournemouth was absolutely massive. I'm going to go 1-0 Wednesday, and FIFA's going to agree with me. Next up, we're heading to Deep Dell. We've got Preston going up against Rotherham. Now, I'm expecting a really tough game here. You only need to look at how many goals Rotherham are actually scoring to know that they're going to put our backline under real pressure here. They've scored 10 goals in their last 4 matches. Now, the unique situation that Preston currently find themselves in are that we very much had sort of like a summer transfer window in January. We've signed 8 players in January, obviously. None of these players get a pre-season or time to bed in. They very much have to be thrown straight in and hit the ground running, you know. We lost a lot of quality in the January window, especially losing Ben Davis. So it's going to take time for all these new players to click into the squad. I'm not expecting results to happen immediately. And I think that as Preston fans, we probably do need to be a little bit patient over these next few weeks to give these new players a real chance to find their feet. Now, don't get me wrong, I am excited about what the rest of the season could hold. Anthony Gordon especially, I think, really is maybe the answer to our problems that we've had going forward recently. You know, we've only scored 1 goal in our last 4 matches. We found it really hard to create chances recently. Defensively, we've been a little bit more solid, but that's cost us our attacking threat. So Alex Neil really needs to work on trying to strike that balance. Having said all that, I feel like Rotherham may do a number on us here. I'm going to go reluctantly 2-1 Rotherham and hope that I'm proven wrong here. FIFA's also back in Rotherham. They've gone 1-0 to the away side. Next up, we're going to QPR up against Blackburn. Now, the Championship's absolutely crazy at the moment. Had QPR not beat Watford in midweek, they would have been sat 21st in the league. Instead, they moved all the way up to 17th. So really congested in that lower half of the Championship at this point in time. But an interesting game coming into this one. Now, Blackburn probably still have some quite realistic ambitions of making it into the top 6 come the end of the season, especially with Bournemouth currently faltering. Blackburn have a game in hand on them, and we'll see this sort of game as a real opportunity with the way they're playing at the moment. They've won 3 out of their last 4 matches now. Obviously, their last 2 games been pretty tight, but they've done enough to win them each by 1-0. They'll also look at QPR's recent home form and think that this is probably a decent opportunity. QPR haven't won at home since the 24th of November. Now, don't get me wrong, this would be probably typical Blackburn for them to go ahead and lose that game for that reason, really. You know, there's been a couple of times over the last few years, really, where Blackburn have gone on a really good run, looked like they're right on the cusp of making it into the top 6, and then their form just slumps right back down again, doesn't it? So they'll want to avoid any such things happening in this game. QPR have struggled with their home form recently. Do you know what? I'm going to back Blackburn, but I wouldn't be at all surprised to see maybe QPR pulling something out of this one. I'm going to go 1-0 to the away side. They're getting through these tight games recently. FIFA's going to agree with me. Next up we go to Stoke up against Reading. Now Reading, I feel like in the top 6 are very much the team who's going a little bit under the radar at the moment. They're not getting all too much attention, obviously. Loads of coverage at the moment on the top 3 and the other 2 relegated clubs, Bournemouth and Watford. But I think because Reading are sort of like the surprise package of the top 6 so far this season, they're going quite under the radar, but they really can't be taken lightly with the sort of football they're playing at this point in time. You'd expect them to be quite well rested for this game, with their last game being last Friday actually, obviously with that fantastic performance against Bournemouth. Lucas João scored that absolutely outrageous goal as they put 3 goals past them, and the Irish side who's playing with a lot of confidence. Now the same can't quite be said for this Stoke side at the moment. It's been a frustrating time, I think is the best way to put it lately. They're without a win in their last 7 matches, but like we always mention, a lot of draws this season for Stoke. 11 draws already this season. Only Millwall so far this season have drawn more matches in the Championship. Now Reading could very well come unstuck. It could be a similar game to what they had against Preston, that game finishing 0-0 in the end, where they didn't quite click up into gear and get going. But you feel like if they start well, they probably go on to win this one with the quality they have going forward. I'm going to go 2-0 Reading in this game. Thief saying it'll be 1-0 Reading. And then that's our final game to go ahead and predict. We got Wycombe going up against Nottingham Forest. Now, the Forest, absolutely massive win for them in midweek, beating Coventry by 2-1. Like we mentioned at the moment, predicting teams at the bottom of the table, never mind predicting 2 of them going up against each other, is an absolutely impossible shout at the moment. But all things considered, massive 3 points for them there. By no means have they been sort of the most fluid side to watch under Chris Hughton so far, but on the general scale of things, they have been a lot harder to beat, and they have been churning out the results here and there. Now, for Wycombe, it's going to be a real test for them to stay up from this point that they currently find themselves in. They do have a couple of games in hand on the teams above them. However, 1 win in their last 7 now. They find themselves 12 points off safety, and considering that they've only put back-to-back wins together so far this season once, it's going to be a real test of character. Now, for Wycombe, it was a good test of character, that draw against Birmingham last time out. Reacting to conceding 7 against Brentford with a clean sheet can only serve them well. And what Wycombe can do is make themselves really frustrating to play against. And I think they'll do that in this game against Forest. Now, if they want to have any sort of hopes of survival, these are the sort of games they need to be winning. But I feel like Forest may end up finding themselves a bit frustrated. Going to Wycombe this season hasn't always been the free 3 points that I think a lot of people thought it would be at the start of the season. Forest score prediction here, going to go for a 1-1 draw. I think that Wycombe may frustrate Forest, with Thief saying be 1-0 Forest. Well guys, there we have it. That will now wrap it up for this week's score prediction. So as always, do get your thoughts in the comments down below in terms of what you guys see happening over the weekend. Very interested to see. Get yourself onto that prediction leaderboard. It's always really interesting to see you guys battling it out there. But apart from that, thanks for watching guys. Make sure to leave a like if you did go in to enjoy, and please do subscribe for a bit of regular Championship content. But apart from that, thanks for tuning in guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.